Hey everyone, welcome to the new demo for Viper charts. So this is it. So if we look here, it's a similar UI, it's very same, but there's a lot of kind of major changes to the actual code base that make the app a lot more streamlined and, more importantly, a lot less laggy. So that's one of the things that I've been trying to focus on, is making it more performant. So that way, as we start to scale out data, it's easier to add new things, add new features without the app actually lagging. So here we're on the latest build, and then in a tab here I have an older build pulled up. This is from like December. So yeah, so let's get into it. So first up, we have our time frames. We can switch time frames. Up here in indicators, well, we actually also added a chart name, so you'll be able to rename and name charts. This isn't fully implemented yet, but if we go to indicators here, you can choose what indicator you want to display. Currently, volume doesn't work, but you can display like price lines or candlesticks, and then you can search for a data source here. We're currently supporting FTX and KuCoin. So if we want to do, let's say, KuCoin, Bitcoin, USDT, we can go ahead and plot that. And here we go. So we can zoom out, we can resize the scale, move around. We can see the data set name here. You can see the current value. And we can see that the y-axis, the y-plot, is actually the amount of decimal places is going to equate the decimal places in this number. So whatever is the max data set for displaying like numbers, like if we display ETH-perp, for example, which I think has 2 decimal places, if we now add that, we can see that, oh, that actually has 1 decimal place. But if you got a number with 2 decimal places, then all of a sudden the y-axis would be 2 decimal places as well. So there's a part of the engine that calculates decimal places based on all the sets that are available. You can hide all this stuff. You can delete it. One of the big efficiency changes that we've done is we've actually made it so that way when the code for calculating indicators, like calculating open, high, low, close values, or for example, like doing an SMA, like if we do a BTC -perp SMA. Oh, that's ETH-perp. Okay. When we do this simple moving average, usually every time you move the range in the older version, if we come here, well, I'd have to get rid of all this stuff, but we could do it here. So every time I plot, let's say, an SMA, which is right there, it'll be recalculating it. So every time I move, it's recalculating. You can see it's kind of already hanging a bit, like it's not super, it's pretty laggy compared to like this. This is much smoother. Not just that, well, first of all, that is going to improve the performance a lot. That's something that we never intended to have in the first place, but it was just something that was, because we're still iterating, it was there. But so yeah, so that's going to make it so that way indicators are only recalculatable basically when you need it. So if you want to recalculate a specific time, you can do that. Also, if you need to recalculate a specific time, and that time is dependent on variables from other times, for example, this is a 20-period SMA, so if I update one point of the 20-period SMA, and there's there's going to be 20 other candles that are dependent on that, those times will automatically update. So the rendering engine has been updated to basically do all that stuff for you without you having to actually worry about it. You can just focus on writing indicator code. So there's that. Also, as you can see here, if we go out to data that hasn't been loaded, there's this thing where it'll basically say if there's not enough data, there will be like breaks. This would happen on like SMAs, or if we go to like on the 1-minute chart, if we go to like a data set that is, I don't know, like barely traded, like something like this. There's a lot of like weird shit where this just goes from its actual value to 0. Whereas if we go on here, this has been completely fixed. By basically, has it been fixed? Yes, it has. So yeah, so it's been fixed basically by the data that, if there's not data available, it's just ignored. So what would happen previously is if there was like missing data, like if there was gaps, because if we actually plot the candlesticks erect BTC, you'll see here there's going to be gaps. So because there were gaps, the data was not calculating and averaging together properly. So that's something that we've fixed. So that means that even if you have a simple moving average of something like Bitcoin, and you just plot it, the data that gets loaded, this might be having some API issues due to we're using a public FTX API, but as you can see here, like the data that's loaded isn't it's like accurate. Now this is going to update because what's going to happen is it's only loading data that's visible. So it's actually not pulling. So moving averages, of course, are calculated by like the last n amount of candles. So what this is doing is it's basically loading the last amount of candles that are visible. But because we haven't fetched that data, it's going to update. So you can see the moving average will actually change. So that's one of the side effects of our system that we're using. But I think that the way that we're doing it is just, it kind of makes the most sense. We could make it so that way if the data is just not available at all, then don't render that part of the indicator. Like if we look back 20 candles as there's no data, then just don't render or don't calculate. The problem is if you have gaps, like how does Viper actually know the difference between data that hasn't been loaded or data that has been loaded but there's just no data? There's kind of ways to do it, but I just think this is the best implementation for now. We also fixed the time frame changing, so that way it just resets the range. So previously the range would kind of try to build the range similar to the one you were already looking at, but on a different time frame. We just made it so that way it resets to the default, like looking at basically now. We also added back, so we kind of basically refactored the entire engine for computing like percent and normalized and default charts. So basically what would happen previously, for example, if we go here, two things. One, this is a single-threaded app, so this is the older one. So this is single-threaded. So if we move around here on a percentage chart, I mean, there's just a lot of issues. It's just super laggy. If we zoom out, zoom in, this is really not ideal. And compare it to something like if I pull up TradingViews one. I mean, TradingViews is a lot better. There's about 39 assets on here. Here there's about 20 maybe 25, and theirs looks better. So that's something that I wanted to fix. So we did two things. One, I went in and I made it multi-threaded. So if I go ahead and switch back to the I think if we just say head, I think. I actually don't know how to check out. There we go. So if we go ahead and check out back to master, this is going to load the newest version. So you saw what it was like before, how laggy it was. Well, as the data starts to load in, you're going to notice that it's a lot more performant. I mean, it's heaps and bounds, and there's two reasons for that. One of them is that, like I said, it's multi-threaded, so that means that you can still interact with the UI and do things while your chart loads. This is much less laggy now, this movement. It's not ideal, but this is probably as good as it's going to get. You can also delete charts that you have selected by pressing the delete key. We're going to be overhauling the grid system at some point to make it more like aggr.trade, but that's something in the future. So yeah, so now that we have all the data loaded again, I mean, it's a world of difference. Also, the plot things here, the names of the plotted assets, the data sets, that is now on the actual main chart rather than before. It was all of that information was on the Y scale, so we moved it off of this scale and moved it here. But yeah, so that's that. This is a lot more, it's just a lot nicer. Now you can quick switch between all these charts a lot faster because it's single-threaded, or because it's multi-threaded. So here's our default chart. We can resize and scroll down to all the data. We can hide a data set. You're not really going to see it, but you can see some of them popped in and out. You'll see it better on this chart. Re-add, close them, remove them, add another one if you want. So yeah, that's that. We completely rewrote all that. And then, is there anything else that I can talk about? So, I'm not entirely sure. I think that's about it. I think just the refactors and making the app more performant has been a big improvement. It's just gonna make a heap load of difference in the in actually using it as we start to add more features, which is kind of what I want to start to focus on. Now that we got it in a decent place. So there's a couple things, there's a lot of like little things that I want to add, and I'm going to make a list of like all the stuff we're trying to add over the next couple weeks that are little. But the big things are going to be refactoring, like rebuilding this entire UI. So one of the things that we're going to want to do is add support for custom like data set implementations. So basically you'll be able to import data sets from You'll have a Viper data set, then we'll have a data set specifically for public exchanges like FTX and Binance. So like these will be plugins basically. And then ideally plugins for other things like Glassnode and other platforms that people use. And so that's one step. And the other step is that this UI is just absolutely terrible. First of all, it's laggy. The user experience doesn't make any sense. A lot of things that need to be changed. A lot of user experience improvements to like you can't right click or change a data set. Like I can't right click an indicator and change the data set, or right click the data set and change the indicator. Like there's a lot of little stuff that needs to change. Like completely ignoring and getting rid of this grid system is going to be important. Yeah, adding support for our Viper listeners. So we have listener servers going up that are on FTX right now. They're just collecting data, but I have to actually implement them in a way that I'm ready to show. Right now they're still very experimental, and so I'm not ready to show it. But yeah, so that's kind of it. The big announcement is that this demo is now available for closed testers. And the what else? Oh yeah, it's available on GitHub now. So it's not like exactly public. I mean, it's public, but it's not exactly like ideal. It's still in a very experimental stage, but you can experiment with it if you want to. So yeah, that's the update.